Morning, everybody. If you're just starting to join us, we're going to be starting in a minute or two. We're just waiting for everybody to be admitted. So make yourselves comfortable. And thanks very much for taking the time to be with us this morning. Good morning, everybody. If you're just joining us, we're just getting ready to start this webinar with Business Gateway. We'll just give you a minute or two for everybody to come in and join us and settle in. So you still have a minute if you want to run and get that last minute cup of coffee or cup of tea before we get started. And thank you very much for spending time with us this morning. We're looking forward to a great webinar. We have our panel here, warming up and ready to go. For those of you just joining, we will start off in another couple of minutes. Just letting everybody come into the webinar, join and get settled in. So you still do have literally 2 minutes to grab a last minute cup of tea, coffee, and settle in. You can see we've got a great panel with us, all settled in, ready to join this morning. So just a couple more minutes and then we will get started. Okay, for those of you that are just joining us just now, we're just settling in, getting ready to start the webinar with Business Gateway. Got a good panel session ahead, and we're just giving everybody a minute or two to come through, join us and settle in. So you've literally got another minute before we start if you want to grab your cup of tea or cup of coffee and settle in. Okay, again, just a welcome to everybody. Thank you for spending time with us this morning. We're just letting everybody come in and settle in, and we are just about to get ready to start. So thank you for joining us this morning. I'm just going to start by running through some general housekeeping before I move on to introduce our fabulous panel. So, for those of you that are just joining, just to let you know, we've placed everybody on mute just to avoid the background noise. And in terms of just general housekeeping, we are recording this session just to make you aware. It will be made available after the webinar. So a very warm welcome to everybody. I'm Carolyn Currie. I'm the Chief Executive of Women's Enterprise Scotland. It is my pleasure to be chairing this event with you this morning on behalf of Women's Enterprise Scotland and this joint event we're holding with Business Gateway. We have a great panel with us here today. I'm very happy to be joined by Sarah Johnston, Alex Feechan and Lynne Mann. And I'm just going to hand over to each of them just to do a brief introduction before we get started. So Lynne, we'll start with you first then. Would you just like to introduce yourself? Tell us just a little bit about the business that you run.
Hi there, Carrie. Thanks for that. Yes, I'm Lynne Mann of Supernature Oils. We started the business 10 years ago this year as an on-farm diversification. I had a completely separate career. I worked as a counsellor therapist, and my husband's a tenant farmer. And really, he was just finding it harder and harder to make a living on the small farm that we have on the outskirts of Edinburgh. I was on a career break after having had our daughter, and he was looking at possible diversifications on the farm, and he mentioned cold pressed rapeseed oil as a possible alternative or added income stream. And I said, oh, what's all that about? He said it's supposed to be healthier than extra virgin olive oil. And I said, oh, don't talk rubbish, nothing's healthier than extra virgin olive oil. And so I looked into it for him, and when I found out that actually, in fact, it was, I encouraged him to kind of, you know, get started with it. But he wasn't so keen on the kind of sales, marketing, PR side. So I said, well, how about for sort of 6 months, a year, I help you sort of get it off the ground and do that side, and then you can just get on with it. The idea being that he would kind of get it into a few farmers markets and maybe a couple of local shops, and then I would go back to doing my thing and he would go on with that. So yeah, so 10 years later, we now export to several countries. We're now the most awarded cold pressed rapeseed oil in the UK. We have 17 different infused oils as well as our original oil, and we supply a lot of hotels and restaurants as well as selling online and in lots of retail shops. So it's been quite a journey.
Okay, thanks very much, Lynne. Yes, so for anybody listening in that's thinking about diversification, and certainly that's been a big theme through the impacts of COVID, hasn't it? Then Lynne is definitely the one you want to be quizzing in terms of her success in diversifying the business. Okay, Alex, we'll come to you next. To introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your business.
Hi everybody. So my business is FINDRA. FINDRA is a stylish, versatile and sustainable outdoor clothing brand. I founded FINDRA back in 2014. I'd spent 25 years in the fashion and textile industry, based in Scotland, and had travelled all over the world doing my job as a designer, specialising in knitwear. And I also love the outdoors. A big part of what I enjoy is getting outdoors and cycling or paddleboarding, lots of those things. And back in 2013, I was really into mountain biking, absolutely loved the sport, and kind of decided that I wanted to buy some kit for my activity. And I went along to my local trail centre and stood in the shop and had a look around and thought, there's not a great deal of product here for women. There's a tiny little sort of corner, probably about 10% of the overall product offering, and the rest was for men. And at this point, I went out every weekend with an amazing bunch of women, all with lots of responsibilities in their life, kids, mortgages, jobs, careers. But our Saturday mornings were just so much fun, working hard to get to the top of the hill and then kind of enjoying coming down and cycling over rocks and roots and all sorts. And I stood in the trail centre shop and I kind of looked around and I thought, this is really not doing these women justice. And it looked like what they call in the industry the shrink it and pink it approach, which is when a man's product is taken and it's reduced in size and a nice pink flower or go faster stripes added, and that's supposed to make us women happy. So that was my kind of light bulb moment. It was, I believe that I felt that I could do something better, and that was really the start of my kind of journey into thinking about what that better would be. I knew I wanted to create a clothing brand. At that point it was specific for women. I wanted it to be stylish because we all biked and we all wanted our clothes to work, but we all went to the cafe afterwards, and as my mum would say, we all probably looked like a right stack of tatties at that point. So it was about sort of combining style with function, and I knew I wanted it to be sustainable, so I predominantly wanted to use natural or recycled raw materials, and merino was one that I'd worked with in my previous life in knitwear days. And basically from launch in 2014, I've grown the business year on year. Amazingly, not long after launch, men started to say they wanted some of it, which did blow my mind a little bit. And we resisted for quite a few years, and then in 2018 we introduced a men's range. And as we kind of went along on the journey, we also, I started to see that the products weren't just for cycling. The products could be worn to do any outdoor activity, whether it's walking your dog or going mountain climbing and whatever. The products are really, really versatile. And so the brand has evolved, and it's kind of been a really crazy journey, lots of ups and downs, but we are now an outdoor clothing brand that sells to men and women. We have done lots of things in terms of revenue streams. We've tried all sorts of things from physical stores to wholesale to going to lots and lots of events. And at the end of 2019, we kind of done a big analysis of all of that and realised that online was the way we wanted to go forward. And then we went into 2020 and that has been accelerated hugely. So we're very much focused on the online digital side of things. And that's really a very quick update as to who I am and where we are, and FINDRA.
Okay, thanks very much, Alex. I think a great example of turning what you love into a business, which I think is something a lot of people are often interested in. How do you choose these two things? So I'm sure we'll hear more about that in the questions later. So Sarah, coming over to you next, you'd like to just tell us a little bit more about you and your business.
Sure. So I am co-founder of a data-driven marketing agency, IndigoLeap. So I worked in digital marketing for the last over 15 years, a long time, and worked for some big agencies at the time. Had the privilege of working for some amazing brands and companies across public and private sector, and it was great. And what I found I really, really love more than anything is data and stats and numbers, and was a bit of a stat nerd and just loved the fact that even on a website, you're like the free tools that you can get, like Google Analytics and other analytics tools, give you so much information, and it feels like such an underutilized tool. So at the stage when we started IndigoLeap, my business partner and I started it a couple of years ago. We were both at the stage we had young kids. It was quite difficult to try and juggle part-time work with office hours and then try and focus on the work that we love to do. So we set up IndigoLeap together to just enable us to have a little bit more flexibility in when we work, and also to really focus on the bit of our work that we loved, which is using people's data and stats and analytics to make things better and to make their websites work better, make their marketing work better. So it's been really good. We've had the privilege of working with some amazing clients, and we've really enjoyed it. We've really managed to focus in on the kind of the bits that we enjoy doing, and really focus on the data and try and own that space. And then since the pandemic hit, we've focused a little bit more on trying to deliver. We do quite a lot of training and talks and things with our clients, and then it's trying to take that online a little bit more and develop wider training courses, because there's so many people starting new Shopify shops, starting new websites, to try and take some of what we know and put it out there online, which is a bit more of a challenge, just to try and translate what we do in person, working with people, to just putting it up online. But we're lucky, we do really like what we do, and there's no shortage of stats. We always say if we could just get everybody who has a website using their web analytics to its full potential, we'd be really happy. That would be amazing.
Well, maybe we can do some of that here today then and start putting in a few tips. I mean, thanks very much, Sarah. I'm sure there will be plenty of people here wondering how you juggle having a family, having children, with starting a business. There's a lot of juggling with families and caring commitments during the pandemic generally, hasn't there? And certainly there's never been a better time for people to be taking advantage of digital as a tool, has there?
Definitely.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. So as many of you might know, the reason we're having this webinar today is to discuss and focus a little bit about the gendered impacts of the pandemic, because as with any public health crisis, this one has had gendered impacts, and there have been specific impacts on women who have been running their own businesses. In fact, almost since the start of the pandemic, research has told us that women as a group have been disproportionately impacted. It will come as no shock, I'm sure, to many of you to hear that a good deal of that impact has been driven by the juggling of the caring commitments, whether that's been homeschooling or whether that's been vulnerable adult care. All of that has had quite a significant impact on women's lives generally, but particularly on their businesses and how their businesses are run. So we want to make the most of today by looking at how we might be able to help you to get some tips to talk about the successes perhaps that people have had during the pandemic, and also to talk about the challenges and how we best overcome them. And for those of you like Sarah, who like your data and like your statistics, I'm going to drop in a few statistics as we go, just to give you some sense of the context. So we're going to start off with stats around the general landscape for women in Scotland. So here in Scotland, women-owned businesses are around 20% of the business base, which is, you know, quite a big gender gap in enterprise participation in this day and age. But those businesses deliver a total of 8.8 billion gross value add into our economy every year, which is round about 6-7% of gross domestic product here in Scotland. Quite a sizable sum. But perhaps more interestingly, they have created over 230,000 jobs. Now that is 13% of total private sector employment in Scotland. So at a time when we're focusing on job creation, women's entrepreneurship is very important and has a key role to play during the pandemic. Okay, so bear with us as we start to go through some of the questions. If you have got questions you would like to submit, please do let us know. We'll do our best to cover them. And for those of you that have already pre-submitted questions, I've got a note here. And we'll try to get through them all. I am reliably informed that there are over 160 of you joining at the moment, so we will do our best to cover off some of the points. Okay, so we've heard a little bit from our panelists about how they've started up in business, but I'm interested to know, what traits do you think are really important when you're starting up a business? And I'm going to ask that firstly to you, Alex, because you mentioned the many ups and downs of business life, and I think lots of people will relate to that. So, you know, what traits do you think are important when you're starting up and growing a business?
Well, I think one of the things that I remember really early on, when I started the business, I was part of a business accelerator program, and one of the things that I was told was to get comfortable being uncomfortable, and that I always think that's a really true statement, because there's a lot of you don't really know how it's all going to go. You can have a really clear idea of how you want it to go, but it can be pretty unpredictable. So you have to be pretty resilient. You have to be very determined. There's a lot of really tough times, and I think for me, my vision is always the thing that gets me through. I've got a very clear vision of how I, you know, where I see my business and my brand going. I don't necessarily always know how I'm going to get there, and so it's about hard work, because it is really hard work. You have to be prepared to put in the hours. In some ways, you have to be prepared to kind of give up your life a little bit, because it just takes over your mind and your life. And so having good supportive people around you that get that and are supportive of your passion is important. But I think hard work, resilience, and determination, and belief in your vision, belief in yourself, that you'll find a way through it, really.
Thanks very much. Some really powerful messages there, Alex. Lynne, Sarah, do you have anything to add to that? Anything that particularly stands out from your career?
Oh, sorry. No, go on, you go, Sarah.
I was because we're more of a kind of a consultancy business model. One of the things that we had to get used to, particularly I find it more difficult, is the kind of confidence to talk about money, because you're selling yourself. It's quite difficult to, well, not everybody finds it difficult, but I find it a slight challenge to value my time and to value everything that you're doing enough. So you have to have a conversation about this is how much my time and my service is worth, and you have to believe in that, and you have to safeguard it, because you have a tendency to try and over deliver or not value your time enough. And you have to have a kind of confidence in yourself and your ability, and to just have those sometimes slightly awkward conversations about time and about money and about cost, and you kind of have to believe in your own worth, because everything you do has to be profitable, and you have to focus on that. And I think when you're selling your time, that can be a tricky part of it. So you kind of have to set that in stone, that this is my product, this is my time, this is how much it's worth, and kind of try and stick to that, which can be a challenge.
Okay, thanks. That's certainly advice that makes my old banker's heart sing. You know, you definitely have to be able to make a profit and definitely value your time. It is an art form, isn't it, when you're starting up in business? Lynn, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, as well as obviously the things about, persistence and determination and things like that, I would just add that for me, I think it's really important to put yourself into what you do, to be yourself. When I was like Alex, I was in a business accelerator as well, and someone there said to me something that really stuck with me, was that people buy people. And a big thing in business is about building relationships. And if you think you're presenting a front of how a business person should be, or how you should present your business, and you think you're presenting this, people sense that. People sense that you're presenting something that you think you should be, rather than so they're connecting with that, and so they're not connecting with you. So I think really trying to be as much yourself as you can in your business. And the other thing is taking yourself seriously, not in a sober way, but taking yourself seriously in your own capabilities and your own strengths, that you can do what you think you want to do, that you're more capable than you maybe think you are.
Okay, well, thanks. Well, stick with that capability theme, actually. I'm getting some practical questions coming in on the chat, so I'm just like to cover some of these off first of all. So I'll tell you what the questions are, then I'm going to come to you for the answers. So Sarah, specifically, we've got some digital questions. A question from India. Do you know of any free short tutorial classes for how to use Google Analytics? Lynn, a question for you. Around how did you get your oils into supermarkets? And I know you've touched on sometimes having to go outside your comfort zone, and perhaps might want to expand a little on your own initial selling experience. And another question, Sarah, for you. Somebody, Lisa, who's going to launch an online business using Shopify. What are the key statistics that she should be focusing on there? So I'll start with you, Lynn, and then Sarah, I'll come back to you around those specific questions on digital. So Lynn, how did you get your oils into the supermarkets, and perhaps expanding a little around what was your first sales experience like?
Okay, so my first sales experience was our designer of our bottles and labels was a good friend of ours who helped us design our packaging. And he said, how are you actually going to sell this oil in? At the time, we only had our original oil, one product. And he said, it's not as if you're just going to be able to put cases of it in the back of the car and drive around Edinburgh. And I said, well, actually, that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I loaded up the back of the car. I went to 27 different butcher shops, delis, restaurants in Edinburgh, and basically said to them, we've produced this oil in our farm. Would you be interested in either using it in your restaurant or stocking it in your shop? The 27th place that I went to was a butcher's shop in Tollcross. And I think I maybe had a look of desperation on my face. And he said, I'll take a box of your oil. So it may have been a very different story if that hadn't happened. But I came home and we were jumping up and down with joy because I had sold one box of oil. So I kind of thought I need to get a different attitude to this sales, because I had kind of psyched myself up for days to selling that one box of oil. And I realized after that that for me, the sales of our product had to be about something different than I'm selling this product, I've got to get people to buy it. I thought it has to just be me kind of letting people know about our product. It has to be just me getting the message about our product out. So I just started to think about it as that. It was just, you know, giving out samples, giving out leaflets. So I started to go to kind of networking events. I started to go to Scotland Food and Drink, have a lot of events that are, you know, they're like farmers markets, food and drink fairs, things like that. And then you let people sample your products. People say to you, oh, so and so, you know, you get to know people kind of in the food and drink industry in Scotland. So really through word of mouth, networking with other people, you start to find out about who the buyers are. And it's really through that, going to events, and Scotland Food and Drink have events where you, you know, get to meet buyers from different, so really it was all kind of that process. It took us, you know, months before we started to find out who the different buyers are at different places. And so yeah, it's really just a process of putting yourself out there.
Yeah, and a good network as well to pull from. Okay, thanks. And so Sarah, what about those all important technical questions then?
So in terms of starting out with Google Analytics, one of the best places I would go to is Google actually have free kind of training called Analytics Academy. Now, one thing to note with Google Analytics is they've only recently launched in October Google Analytics 4, which is like a completely upgraded version of analytics, if you like. It's a new version, and it is indeed quite different from the universal analytics that we've all been using. So most of the learning that you'll do on analytics just now will be on the universal analytics, and I think that's what Google's Analytics Academy is still focusing on, unless it's changed in the last little while. But it's a free course that's run by Google, and it just takes you through analytics. It gives you a bit of the basics. It tells you what the different metrics mean. It takes you through the user face. So I would probably start there, and for a general overview. If you ever want something really specific, like if you're like, I just don't know how to track insert thing here, have a Google, just have a quick Google and see if you can find somebody that's answered it. And also Business Gateway Digital Boost have got quite a bit of information just on the Digital Boost online resources section of the website. There's some information there, but Analytics Academy is quite a good place to start to get a general feel. And then if you're setting up a Shopify shop and you want to use analytics, some of the key data that I would look at, if you're driving lots of traffic, say you're doing Facebook ads or you're doing Google Analytics, Google ads or anything like that, make sure you tag them up using UTM parameter tracking. So you essentially make sure that, say, your Google ads is linked up with your analytics, or that in your Facebook ads you've got a little string at the end of your URL that goes $UTM equals, and it's code, but it makes sure that your ads are telling analytics, this traffic came from this ad, and then you can track it on your website and see. So the most important things you're going to want to look at is around your sales. You're going to want to look at how many transactions have you tracked on your website, what's the conversion rate, so how much traffic did it take to get that sale, and how much was the cost of conversion. So if you've spent a lot of money on advertising and you've got 2 sales, what's the cost per conversion? Or if you spent only a little and you've got a lot. So those, I would always look at your sales and conversions, and then where did they come from, what traffic sources are driving the most, and how are people moving through your site. But focusing on your conversions in your e-commerce or Shopify shop and the traffic sources that drove that will be the best way. And the tracking, if you Google UTM tracking for Google, you'll get taken to a developer looking Google page, but it helps you build those strings to make sure that you can tag everything up.
Okay, thanks very much, Sarah. Some brilliant tips there about how to really push and drive your digital sales, because sales really are the lifeblood of any business, and I guess never more importantly than now. I think we often asked, or we're often asked certainly, about how to raise finance and funding for a business, and I am going to come on that and ask our panelists some of their experiences. But I think it's very important not to lose sight of the fact that bootstrapping your business, building it up by maintaining a firm view on your costs, to minimise your costs and to maximise your sales, is a very effective way to start up and build a business, particularly when you're testing out new markets, or you're testing out new products, or you're just wanting to dip your toe in the water, whether that's a business startup in itself or diversification and looking at new initiatives. Being able to cover the costs of that from your sales is really a very, very effective strategy. So, okay, I'm going to come now to speak a little bit about funding. And the key statistic, I guess, that always comes to my mind when we talk about funding, and particularly in the context of women-owned businesses, is that women start up businesses with 53% less capital than men. So being able to grow your business, being able to invest in your business is particularly important. So I would like to know the importance to your businesses of funding and investment. How have you all managed to grow your businesses? And Alex, I'm going to come to you first of all, because I know you have taken on investment in your business. And would you like to just tell us a little bit more about that and about your experiences there?
Yeah, I decided really early on, probably before I launched, in fact, that I would be looking for investment, and that was a decision I'd made. In my particular type of business, it was based on having worked with lots of small startup fashion and clothing brands, and seeing the challenges around getting the business off the ground. There's a really long lead time from the kind of creation of a design or a product to actually getting it on the shelf and being able to sell it. And a lot of the challenges around that are that manufacturers, suppliers have minimums. When you go for small runs, you get surcharges. The kind of process of designing through to the finished product can be anything from 9 to 12 months. And so there's and I guess as well, you know, building a brand, there's lots of the sort of creatives around building a brand and putting it out there in the kind of aesthetic and visual way that you want to represent it. So there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of upfront costs for the type of business like FINDRA or other clothing brands. And throughout my kind of career, I had I'd kind of dabbled in working for myself when my kids were younger. And so I'd had a taste of running my own business and kind of bootstrapping, you know, much smaller scale. And all of this led me to making the decision that when I started and launched FINDRA, that I would be looking for investment. So I kind of went into it with that mindset. I spent the first 2 years getting the business off the ground without bringing investors in. And that was done through some of my own money, through just kind of working from home, being at my kitchen table, doing everything I could to kind of get things up and running, but also being able to kind of access startup grants through Business Gateway. Lynne and I both mentioned an accelerator program that we were part of. There was opportunities there to look into grants and things like that. So I kind of made the most of what I could. And then I took part in Scottish Edge. I took part in that twice. Both times got to the final. First time didn't get any funding. And then the second time I was fortunate enough to get investment and funding. And I decided to use that as a kind of catalyst to then going out and speaking to investors. And looking at getting an investor is quite a long process. There's a huge amount of work involved. So you start off looking at the various investment groups that are out there, and seeing who's the right fit for you, because different investment groups invest in different types of business. And just starting to sort of spend a lot of time putting together your business plan, your one pager, which is the first thing that will go out to people to give an overview of the business. And that is a huge amount of time. And at the same time, you're trying to kind of keep your business going. You're trying to grow sales. You're the one person in the business that's absolutely juggling everything, because at that point there were no employees. And that's really, really hard. That's really hard work. And I probably started the process of looking for investors towards the end of 2015, and it took 9 months to then complete that process. And the whole time, it's not so much looking for the ones that are right, but it's also at the same time kind of saying, well, they're not right for me. They're not the right person. They're not the right person to invest. They're not the right group to invest. I don't like the, I don't get the right feel for them. So you're kind of constantly going through a lot of stuff. And then when you do kind of find who's right for you, there's a lot of you've got to present the business, you've got to present the business to the investment group, pitch to them, lots of questions. You've got to know your numbers. That's the one thing I would say, you absolutely must know your numbers. It's so important. And then finding the right people. And at the point where I was getting close to finding the right people, I had about 3 different groups that were interested, and then you've got to sort of, pardon the pun, knit it all together, weave it together, and bring them together and kind of find out, do they all want to come in on this? And right up until the point at which you sign, the day that you're actually in, the lawyer's office wanting to sign, it's still quite it's extremely nerve-wracking, and you still don't know that all of that is all going to happen. So it's hard work, and you've got to be prepared to go into it knowing that it's going to be really hard work. You've got to go into it. It's not, it's not like Dragon's Den. It's a different thing, but you've got to be prepared to be able to answer questions on your numbers and know your business inside out. And you are the person that knows your business inside out. So yeah, it's hard work, but for me it was the right thing and has been a positive experience ongoing, because I've got supportive investors. So that's been good for me and for FINDRA.
Perhaps back to the importance of business planning right at the start, Alex, I guess, to know, you talked about, how important vision is, know what you want to achieve, know what your business needs, and put the graft into that. I suppose many people don't really think about starting up a business to complete a business plan or to do the financial or banking side of things, but these are part of the necessary grunt work, if you like, that has to be done, that can pay dividends, especially when looking out for investment.
I think you've got to see it as a roadmap. I said right at the start, it doesn't always go the way you plan. Absolutely doesn't. But you need some sort of roadmap in terms of how you're going to get, if you're going to do a 3-year forecast of, I'm going to turn over this, how are you going to get there? What are you going to do to achieve growth? What are you going to do to be profitable, to break even? How are you going, so you need that roadmap, I think, especially around the finances. And the more informed you are as the founder of the business, the more informed you are of the numbers, the more in control you will feel of your business, because the numbers can be quite frightening and it can be easy to get caught up in the nice bits, but you're not going to be in control if you don't know your numbers. You have to look at your bank balance each day. You have to know what's coming in and going out. I am by no means an accountant of any level, absolutely not, but I'm a very intuitive, I call myself an intuitive accountant. I know my business. I know roughly, I'm right back of a fag packet person. I'll say to my finance person, now I think it's about this and I think it's about that, and she's like, yeah, that's probably spot on. And that's just a gut feel, because I know my business. I'm not brilliant with spreadsheets and all that stuff, but I know my business in terms of my numbers. And I think get comfortable being in that place early on, really, really early on, and empower yourself with that, because those are your numbers, that's your business. So yeah, I think that's important.
Absolutely. Okay, Sarah and Lynne, I'm going to ask you in a second if you've got anything to add to those points by Alex. I can see we've got a lot more questions coming in, and I am reliably informed that we can go 5 to 10 minutes over. So if we don't manage to get through all the questions by 12, we will perhaps extend it out, assuming our lovely panelists can bear with us an extra 5 to 10 minutes to answer all the questions. Okay, Thank you. So, I mean, Sarah or Lynne, do you have anything just to add to those points around particularly growing a business? I think it is, isn't it, when investment really takes a part, and how do you grow your business, and what have your experiences been? If you could perhaps both answer that briefly, and then we'll move on to some of the other questions. Sarah, do you want to go first? There we are. Oh, Lynne, are you on mute?
Oh.
Yeah. Can't hear you, Lynne.
Okay.
I think I'm on mute. Am I?
Yes, there, yeah.
Oh, yes. You know, just briefly, we did it slightly differently in that we, because we started the diversification because we were struggling financially, we actually had to start it kind of on a shoestring and just build it really slowly. We didn't want to try and get any kind of loans or anything, and we had very little savings that we did put into it. And really what we did was we just dipped our toe in the water with it and started it really small, and really just as we grew it, anything we did make, any profits we did make, we kind of just kept putting it back into it. So for the first few years, we just kept putting any profit. In fact, really for the first 5 years, anything we made, we just kept putting it back in. So we kind of just grew organically. And it was really only the same as Alex. We went into the EDGE competition, and we went for a few local authority grants, and that was the first kind of funding we got. And also we won EDGE funding, and so that enabled us to kind of take a leap in growth. And so we really didn't pay ourselves anything or get any money really till about sort of 4 or 5 years in. So we really kind of did it that way.
Okay, thanks. Certainly Scottish Edge, if any of you are listening, wondering about that, Scottish Edge is a competitive opportunity to access a mix of grant and loan funding. So if you get onto Google, as Sarah says, Google is your friend, you can check out the details there. And Sarah, so coming to you, any final thoughts there?
I mean, what we as more of a consultancy model, our initial investments were all in hardware and software. So it was the physical things that we needed. So we needed laptops and super fast broadband and things like that. So we didn't have any huge startup costs. It was just to have the equipment that we needed, and then some of the software packages that we bought from like Microsoft to digital marketing specific tools, which helped us. And another big massive investment was time. I know it's not money, but it's a lot of time. Time taken away, a lot of 3 o'clock mornings, to just even like build up assets that we needed for even things like presentations and making training courses. Sometimes it doesn't have a massive like monetary cost. It takes a lot of time to do that on top of our day job. So we were the same. We took more of a modest salary and just tried to have a bank of things that we needed. And then recently, in trying to grow, we applied for the Digital Boost grant, which comes around in February. I think that's really good, a really good thing to put on your calendar to just to help you kind of take your business more digitally. It's quite good because it's mostly for us. It's things like hardware and software, so things that we physically need to do the job. But because we're not manufacturing anything, our costs are less. But it's, a lot of time as well.
Okay, thanks very much. So some great top tips coming through there. I'm going to try to run through some of the questions I can see that are continually coming in. We have a question from Emma, who says she's a consultant and essentially sells a service which she provides. She's looking to grow her business, but there isn't any more of her to go around. How do you think she could approach growing her business? And perhaps, coming to you, you're selling skills, I suppose, as a service. What would your thoughts be on that? Have you come across that problem yourself?
Yeah, I think it's that difficult payoff, isn't it? It's, do you take on more of the same work and then take on people to do that work and all of the complexities that come with that, or do you focus in on more profitable areas and try and focus on that and, I don't know, look at your pricing structure? Can you charge more for certain things that you do? Is anything more in demand? But it can be difficult, and I think for us it's trying to look for where can we get efficiencies that will save us time in creating it, so then we can sell that service more efficiently and grow in that way. And is there any physical products that we can sell? So is there a way to package up this knowledge so you can sell parts of it without doing it, so without it always being you thinking, writing, presenting? Is there a way that you can package something up, so in a training course or in documents or downloads or whatever specific skill set is? But it can be difficult, and you do then face a time of, do we take on more people to deliver this service wider, or do we change and focus and scope in and try and focus in on a more profitable and efficient area? So yeah, I think it can be tricky, and then there's big decisions to be made.
Yeah, it is a big decision, isn't it? Especially if you're considering taking on staff. It is a key point for the business. And interestingly, there is research that says businesses that have got strong processes in place, so your point about mapping everything out, are found to be able to scale much easier and quicker than others. So paying attention to those processes and having it all mapped out can actually pay dividends, not just in terms of efficiency, but I guess other people being able to come in and pick up on those skill sets. Okay, thanks very much for that. I've got loads of questions coming in, so please bear with us. We've got some questions round about. Question from Marianne, who's saying she's starting up in business in holistic therapy and is wondering how to go about gaining her first client. And I'm going to link that with a question from Kirsty, from Marie, who says, are there networking events, close contact work in Scotland? So, I guess, Lynne, maybe coming to you first of all. What are your thoughts about getting that first client? It is a key moment, isn't it, for any business? How do you find them if you don't know where they are?
I know. I think whatever industry you're in, whatever area of work, I think other people in that industry, even if they're competition for you, I think online as well, just seeing where people that are doing the kind of thing that you do, seeing what kind of events they go to, what kind of things they're advertising, what kind of things they go to, and then going along to some of these. Maybe if somebody who's doing something similar to what you do, maybe if they're advertising an event, or maybe if they're at a show or something, maybe book in to go along to that and just sort of see what they do, because then you're going to meet people who could potentially be your customers at their event. It's not that you're going along to steal their customers, but you're just kind of getting a feel for the landscape. So things like that. I mean, in the food and drink industry, for my particular area, for me it was before we went to our first farmers market and our first food and drink event, I went along to some of them and just started going along and speaking to other stall holders and saying, what's this farmers market like, and how is it for you? And they were incredibly friendly and helpful. Obviously not other people selling cold pressed rapeseed oil initially, but eventually we became friendly with them too. But people selling other sort of products would say what that market was like, what they were like there, and then I would ask them about the bigger shows and the things like that. So yeah, just talking to people about these events and things.
Okay, thanks very much, Lynne. It is a key area, isn't it? And I guess, yeah. Alex, anything just to add to that at all?
When I launched, I suppose I thought I was going to do a bit of a soft launch. So I, because I was launching in the mountains, because I'd started off the business was for selling products to women who mountain biked. I had a group of friends, and so they hosted little sort of almost like Tupperware nights, but for clothing. So we had quite a few nights at people's houses where I just took my products along and I got people to try them on and buy them, basically. And then I done a trade show. It wasn't a trade show, sorry, it was a direct consumer show, and done things like that to kind of get the brands out there and get products in front of people. But I think getting it in front of people so that they can sort of touch it, feel it, taste it, whatever, is a good thing. It's really important. And it's going to sort of take time. You know, you're completely new to that market, so it's just going to take time for people to understand who you are and what you offer. But just get out there with it, you know, and see where it goes.
Yeah, deep breath and first foot forward. Sarah, anything to add there?
I think for us as well, it's knowing who is most likely to buy it. So who is your audience? Who are you looking to sell to? Who's going to use your product or service? And then, yeah, taking that along with what Lynne and Alex have said, is to try and profile them. Where are they? What do other people who do this do? Where do they find their customers, and what makes you stand out? What makes yours a little bit different, and what messages bring to them? And is there anywhere online where you could have a presence that might help people? What you also want to do is if you do make contact with people,
sorry,
you've then got something for them to find out a little bit more information. So making sure you've got a little bit of a digital footprint even at the start, so people know what you're about.
Okay, thanks very much. Marie, in terms of the close contact networking events, I would suggest ask at your local business gateway, but also check out the social media footprint of a lot of industry bodies to find out what events are happening. So, you know, there is the Scotland Can Do Twitter social media, for example, Entrepreneurial Scotland. Lynne has already mentioned food industry body, Scotland Food and Drink, just to try and find out what events are happening. There is a lot you can find out, certainly from social media in terms of events, but also starting in your local area with Business Gateway is a good way to find out some of those particular specific. Okay, more questions coming in. I am doing my best to keep up, everybody, so please do bear with us. I've got a question here from Laura, who says she owns a home fragrance company. She's a year in and about to do her book, and she's feeling like she's a bit alone, doing everything, feeling like she knows what she needs to do, but getting days where she just feels snowed under. Any advice would just be appreciated. And before I come out to you, I'm going to say, Laura, there is actually sometimes some great advice online. You know, Business Gateway, it has its website, and they'll tell you there about some of the resources that are available. And I would certainly recommend our own website that we launched last year, the Digital Women's Business Centre, which you can find at womensbusinesscentre.com. There are lots of bits of information there for women running businesses, but also some articles from our ambassadors that give you just a bit of source of inspiration sometimes on these down days or those days where you're facing some challenges. So, you know, both Alex and Lynne have contributed to that site. So there are articles from them talking about some of their experiences as well. But let's make the most of our panels while we're here. So those days when you're feeling absolutely snowed under, you know what you should be doing, but it's just a bit tough. Alex, I'll come to you first. What you?
I remember that feeling. I still get that feeling sometimes. So I remember that feeling really weird when it's just you. And you know, a lot of the stuff that you do is not necessarily what you're particularly good at or maybe qualified to do, but you have to do a lot of stuff. And it's really quite difficult. And I think the best thing you can do is, in a sense, step back from it all. So kind of take yourself out of it, because when you're right in the midst of it, you can't kind of see the wood for the trees. So sometimes it's quite good to just step back and take a little bit of time out and remind yourself of why you're doing what you do, why you love what you do, and and then kind of think about what is the most important thing that you have to do. What are the most important things that need to happen to move forward, and just try and kind of get some perspective on it. Go on your bike or go running or go walking, get out into nature, because that helps. And think about, and I think a lot of people, and Lynne and Sarah might be the same, because I certainly suffer from this. I am very bad at looking back at what I've achieved. I'm so busy looking at what I have to do, what I've not done, and you forget to kind of stop and just look back, that if you're a year down the line, that means that you've had a year of experience and a journey that you've taken, and so you'll have learned a lot, and you have to kind of stop and look back and think, right, I've came this far. And quite often the problem that you have today that you can't see a solution to, you probably had a similar problem 6 months previously, but you got past that and you kind of keep going. So yeah, I just think it's important to step back and get some perspective, remind yourself why you're doing what you do, and then kind of come back to it and think, okay, let's kind of prioritise and reset yourself almost, you know, and then, you know, is it time to get someone else, or can you keep going for another year or another 18 months? And just be checking that all the time, that, you know, at what point do you need that other person or whatever. But yeah, that's how I would approach it.
Thanks very much, Alex. See that, Lynne? I'm sure you'll both relate to that. I'm conscious of time, so maybe just a minute each on perhaps any top tips or thoughts or reflections on that point. Sarah, maybe just come to you first.
Do you know, it's a cliche, but the saying "eat the frog," which is if you had to eat a frog every day, you're best just doing it first thing in the morning, then it's done, is the one thing that really is getting to you and it's really causing the issues. If there is one that's worse than others, just try and focus on that first, because I'm quite bad for if there's something that I know that I have to do and I don't know how to do it, or there is a bit of a challenge around it. Oh, maybe could it often do other things that I'm better at, but probably won't have as much of an impact on the load on my shoulders. So I've been trying to be a bit more, right, okay, the one thing that I don't want to do is the one thing that I'm going to do first. And it does actually, it's generally, it helps me over any hurdles and bumps in the road to just attack it.
Great advice. Lynne, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, just two quick things I would say is that, you know, I remember in those early days feeling totally overwhelmed by all the things that it would be really good if you could do, if you could, you know, be really good at doing all the different social media channels, and you could do the marketing, you could do this, you could do that and everything. You're one person or you're a few small team, you're never going to do all the things, you know. So it's like the sooner you accept that, the better. That choose a few things that you can do them as best you can, and get on with all the priorities. And I think the other thing that I found really helpful was other women in business that are at a similar stage on the journey as yourself. I met a couple of them in the business accelerator I was in, and we're still in touch now, you know, 5-6 years later. And, you know, when you're really struggling with that to be able to say to them, you know, oh my God, you know, I'm just tearing my hair out with this, and they've been at the same stage at some point, and that's a real support.
Okay, some great practical advice there. So still got a few more questions to go through, so hopefully you can all bear with us just a little bit longer, and we'll try to get through some of these questions. So we have a question submitted from Laura, which says, my business adapted quite well during the pandemic. She's a freelance dietitian, and moving her consultations online wasn't a big challenge. However, she's always wanted to open her own clinic and wellness centre, but is wondering, is now the time to invest in doing that? Would a physical bricks and mortar clinic be the right thing to do now? Because it seems quite a big responsibility to take that on. So Alex, I'm going to ask that question to you, because I know you have got your own bricks and mortar set up. So what would your thoughts be, or what would your advice be to Laura as she's wrestling with that particular question?
I think unless, well, two things really. I think can the business afford it? There's a lot of nice to haves, but if you can't afford it, if it's going to put pressure on you, then it's maybe not the right time to kind of invest in it. And why is that, working out why that's important? Obviously the face-to-face contact and in-person contact is really important. But having a physical, sort of, for us, we've got a physical shop, there's a lot that comes with it, a lot of additional overheads. You've got to be able to manage that and manage the other parts of the business. So it does, it maybe sounds good and it maybe feels like an exciting thing to do, but you have to work through the business case for it and make sure that the numbers stack up. And maybe it's the sort of thing that you could do as a kind of pop-up. Maybe you could kind of, find a space somewhere that you could sort of be every Wednesday afternoon or something, but you're not paying monthly rents or overheads, and it's part of what you offer, and then you can see how that goes and test the water a bit and see, would that be good further down the line to then invest in a property, because it's a big commitment, it's a big overhead, and what I think COVID in the last year probably taught all of us is that you can run a business from literally anywhere, and if you get your team set up in a way, especially if it's an online business and if it's successful in terms of it works, you can actually make it work, then you can minimise additional unnecessary overheads. So yeah, I think I would weigh it up from the business case, but also think about being a bit more creative about how important, if that contact with people is important, then a pop-up clinic or something like that could be quite a good way to do it. So, yeah.
Thanks very much. And of course, that is the one thing about COVID and the pandemic. It's certainly made lots of business owners think more creatively, hasn't it? And such a good point, Alex, about there being lots of other options in between. It isn't an all or nothing move, is it? And often running your numbers, using your business plan actually as a tool to stress test what's affordable, or at what point perhaps with your sales or your reserves or revenue would it be a good time to do that, can be a really invaluable approach to take. And I mean, Sarah, Lynne, I don't know if you've ever thought about that question. What would your advice be? Have you got any thoughts on that to help, Laura?
I think I would echo the pop-up. Is there a way, because then it's almost like a test, isn't it? It's more of a kind of minimum viable product, if you like. It lets you test out what the audience would think about it, because I think just now as well, you could do audience research with your customers and see if they'd be willing to do that if you were allowed to. But I think the divide between what people say they will want to do and what they physically can do and what they actually will do is quite wide just now, because it's such different times. I think something like a pop-up would be a more maybe sustainable way to test it out just now and see if that is something that's viable for your business, and if not, to try and diversify your online offering and really focus on that.
Okay,
yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Okay, and I have a question here from Susie, who's hoping to launch her bookkeeping business this year and would love to know what is the best investment you made when you were starting out. So for example, was it your tech, a good accountant, market research, social media training, or something else? Or alternatively, is there anything you wish you had invested in more? Just any thoughts that you might have. So Sarah, I'm going to come to you first to ask that question.
I think, like I said before, the best thing that we invested in, that we use every day, is our laptops and the physical tool that we need to do our business. That's used every day, all day, and that was great. Other things that we invested in was also tools that help us sometimes with things like, I know it's bookkeeping, but we signed up to Feechan almost immediately, and that just made elements of the business that could have been a big pain, that just made it easier and streamlined it. So for us, the hardware and to enable us to do the business, and then software to either give us a new product that we can sell to clients, or to streamline areas of the business and make our lives a little bit easier, I think are are the things that have definitely had the biggest impact on us.
Okay, thanks. Alex, anything to add there?
Gosh, I think for me, one of the things that I invested in quite early on was I converted half of my garage. So I made it a little kind of studio and stockroom. And I think that was quite an important part of my startup journey, because it meant that I could have somewhere, because I'd outgrown being based at the kitchen table. So I had somewhere that I could kind of go to, and that held my stock as well, but didn't have any, you know, it was a minimal amount of investment in terms of just getting the garage converted. And it was a really good way of being able to kind of not have those additional overheads in the first couple of years. So, you know, it could be something as practical as that. I look back and I wish that I'd invested much heavier in digital earlier on, because that was the thing that I really wanted to do. But I didn't have a lot of experience and was probably quite terrified of the whole digital world. But I would have gone into that area much quicker. That's hindsight. And one of the best investments that I've made is my finance person, who is absolutely brilliant, and really that knowing your numbers and that person that you can trust, and who just together, you know the numbers, you can work on the numbers. So that was one of my best investments. Yeah.
Thanks very much. And Lynne, do you have any final reflections on that point?
Yeah, I think we should have invested in digital earlier on, and we still haven't really done much with it now. Our online has really just kind of grown organically, and I'm kind of sporadic in what I do with social media. So I think we could really probably have done a lot more with it.
Okay, thanks very much. It seems that at this point I'm just going to drop in one of those other little statistics because it seems quite relevant, and that's to say that women entrepreneurs bring in 20% more revenue with 50% less money invested. So women entrepreneurs, certainly the research tells us, are very efficient, very profitable, good line on the money. So hopefully a lot of you can take heart from that. Now we are just about out of time, even with running over, but there have been a lot of questions about digital. So I'm just going to cover off one final question at digital. On digital rather, for those of you that are still bearing with us, which is I can see quite a number of you. So, you know, during the pandemic, certainly we've seen that digital technologies have helped many businesses to survive. And Alex and Lynne, you've both reflected, I guess, about investing more in digital at the start. It's always easy with hindsight, isn't it? But generally, do you think that the adoption of digital and tech can help female-led businesses grow in general, but also specifically, you know, if you were to invest in digital, what is the one thing you would be looking to invest in? Now, Sarah, I'm going to come to you first as our resident digital expert in on this webinar. How have you seen, you know, digital helping businesses to survive during the pandemic? And what would be your thought about one area to invest in?
I think the thing with digital tools, even over the last 5 years, and particularly accelerated by the pandemic, is the fact that you can now set up a website and an online shop which looks professional, works well online, and you can do all of this without actually having any developer experience. Because there's so many tools out there now, like things like Squarespace or Wix, which actually, or Shopify indeed, if you're building a shop, which let you go in, and something that a few years ago would have cost a lot more money and a lot more time and needed some really specific expertise. You can build a small, decent site yourself with lots of, the tools now are so much more usable, and there's a lot of information kind of provided to enable small businesses to do that. So it feels like the barriers for getting online have never been lower. And even the initial investment that you need up front, oftentimes these are pay monthly. So you don't even need that huge investment up front to get on digital. And I think it's opened up a world of possibility, I think, which has really helped businesses, many of whom, if you were a shop or a deli who's always never really been online, and all of a sudden you had to go online, you had to quite quickly have online booking systems or ways to manage all your different orders and deliveries. Now there's so many platforms and tools which can help you do that and help take the kind of back end off your shoulders. It really does empower a lot more people, and I think particularly for women, that makes it so much more achievable, that makes it so much more almost friendly, if you like, that it's something that you could conceivably do yourself and still do quite well. And it's really difficult to pick one area because it would be so different for everybody, but having a good social media presence and a good website just as your footprint from which to springboard or just to direct people to would probably be the first thing that you would look at. Get those basics right, make sure you've done them properly, you've spent the time, you've got your messaging on that before you start spending money on advertising or driving lots of traffic. Make sure that you've got them as you want them. Would probably be where I would focus first.
Okay, well, thanks very much. Certainly, as the chief exec of a business that has substantially invested in a new website recently, I would definitely echo that. And for those of you that haven't taken note, I am going to say again, at womensbusinesscentre.com, you can subscribe on that website for free. There is a lot of content on there, and we put the special offers out to our subscriber bases, and our most recent offers to be matched with a mentoring programme, and also to get a free place on a leadership programme, haven't seen the light of day outside our subscriber base, because we find these offers are so heavily taken up. So go and subscribe on there. It doesn't cost anything, it's free for the moment. If you are looking for that extra bit, help and support. And of course, Business Gateway's own website and their own programmes are running all the time. It's so easy to access it, isn't it, in this digital world, that it's important to say there are lots of tools and tips out there that you can capitalise on. So I'm just going to finish. Alex, Lynne, do you have a one thing that you are either going to invest in or reflecting back you could invest in terms of digital as we close down?
I think I'll go ahead here. What Sarah said is really important. Start off with a really good website and good social media. Know what your key messages are in your brand. What is it that you are doing? Who is it that you want to speak to? Get all of that really kind of well aligned, and once you're clear on that, then you can start to look at investing in ads and all the things that drive traffic. I spent the first 5 years of FINDRA trying to get sales from various different revenue streams, and now that we're really focused on digital, it's just so much simpler. Everything feels so much simpler. I don't feel that I've got so many different fragmented compartments in my brain. Every single thing that we do now, you go back to is this going to drive traffic? Is this going to get people to our website? And so I think being really clear about what your digital strategy is. We are just about to move to Shopify. We're in the process of rebuilding our site. And the stage that we're at now is the one thing that's really important to us now is our stock management system. Up till what we're doing now, it's all been a bit fragmented, and that creates a lot of problems. And it's just kind of joining all the dots digitally for us. It's going to be, I'm really excited about that, and it's a big step forward for us. So that's a big investment, but I think a really important one. So, yeah.
Hey, Lynne, some final thoughts from you.
Yeah, I'm ashamed to say it, but I'm just going to say it out loud, and then I'm going to have to do something about it, is that we have got lovely products. I love our website. It looks gorgeous. We just got it redone recently. Looks lovely, lovely products. We've got all the social media channels, and I do absolutely nothing with them. I think I retweet the odd thing, and I do absolutely nothing with it. So the thing we need to do is actually have a digital media strategy. We just rely on customers that we've had that from farmers markets, from you know, shops, from shows, that customers, you know, stumbling across our products. Really, we rely on them buying online, and we don't actually really promote. I've done Facebook ads occasionally, don't track them, don't do anything with them. So really, I'm a prime example of what not to do with digital media. So yeah, and it's all there. We've got it all set up. And I just need to do more with it and actually have a digital media strategy. So that's what I'm going to do next.
So you heard it here first then, the digital revolution is starting today. Okay, well, with that, I'm going to say a huge thank you to you all for spending time with us here this morning. I hope it's helped. I started off by talking about some of the statistics of women's entrepreneurship, and those that you that heard at the start, I talked about the 8.8 billion that women-owned businesses contribute to the Scottish economy every year. Now, those businesses are just 20% or less of the business base in Scotland. So if we doubled the numbers of women-owned businesses, we'd be getting another £8.8 billion into our economy. And importantly, at this time, we'd also be creating another 230,000 jobs. Now, that's something our economy could certainly do with at this point in time in Scotland. So they are just some of the reasons as to why women's entrepreneurship is absolutely critical for our national economy. And in addition to those particular numbers, it's worthwhile bearing in mind that radical step change innovation is powered by gender diversity, the kind of innovation that transforms our national competitiveness and boosts our productivity. So more women and a better gender balanced business ecosystem is good for our economy in many different ways. So, you know, we wish you all the very best with the businesses that you are already running and growing. We hope that the webinar here today has helped you to progress that. We haven't managed to get through all the questions, but I am reliably informed that we will make sure we get the answers to some of the questions that we haven't managed to cover back over and out to you. So I'd like to say thank you to Business Gateway for joining us in the webinar today. We're here from Women's Enterprise Scotland, and I'm very pleased that you have taken time out to join us and our fabulous panel today. I would like to thank Sarah Johnson from IndigoLeap, Alex Feechan from FINDRA, and Lynne Mann from Supernature Oils from sharing their fantastic tips and business experiences with us today. We're very grateful to you for joining us, and thanks to all of you at home or wherever you have been for joining us today in this webinar. It's been my pleasure to chair it. I wish you all a very good day, very prosperous economic future with all the businesses that you're starting and growing here. Thank you and goodbye from us all.
Thanks. Bye.